Hi guys, welcome back to Today's Corner. This is Al. So I haven't posted much lately, and that's because I was on vacation. And after vacation, I was kind of in that post-vacation slump where I had to really kind of get caught up on actually a lot of work. So I was really busy for a while. So I didn't really talk about the new ST Strike Team officers. I haven't really talked about the Mantis ship. Fortunately, I think all the other content creators have done a pretty good job of covering those items, and I will make a video kind of covering that as well in a bit, hopefully in a week or so, mainly in regards to how to correctly use the Mantis, how to kind of defeat or try to defeat the new strike team officers, as they're pretty good. They're pretty overpowered, OP, in my opinion, actually, on battleships at the moment. So we'll do a video after this video. So, this video is really going to focus around Chang and Strike Team Ortegas. And I lumped them together because their main ability, or the ability I really want to talk about, is their officer ability. And they are essentially the same except for how they proc. So I guess count that as a blessing in disguise for not being able to post for most of August. So without further ado, let's jump into the overview. We're going to really just kind of take a quick look at their abilities, how they proc. The procking example is probably going to take me a little while to walk through. It's a little bit complicated in terms of how it works. Well, it's not really complicated in terms of how it works. It gets complicated kind of to keep track of everything and when the weapons should fire and shouldn't fire as you progress on and with the procking of these officers. And then we'll kind of go into an example. The example that I'm looking at is something I shot back in end of July. So here you've got Chang's abilities, and here the officer ability, Dogs of War, is the one that we're really going to focus on. It's basically saying as long as the ship deals a critical hit to the opponent while it has hull breach, then Chang has an X% chance of delaying the next weapon attack by 1 round. So you can see that it starts off at 30% and then it maxes out at 50%. So Ortegas actually has a much better ability. The only limiting factor is that whereas Chang you're able to use Chang on any type of ship class, for Strike Team Ortegas, basically you can only use her on a battleship for her officer ability. However, you can see that the base proc chance is at 40% is significantly higher than what Chang was at with 30% at tier 1. And Ortega's, once you have her max, she's going to be at 70%. So, a little bit less flexibility. You have to use her on a battleship, but, it doesn't really matter anyway, because these strike team officers that were released this month are all battleship specific anyway. And I don't think anybody would really consider using Strike Team Ortegas by herself and not on a battleship. So it's kind of a moot thing. But just notice that her proc percent chances are much higher. Even by tier 3 with 52% chance of proc, she's already higher than what Chang was maxed, which is only when Chang maxed, he's only at 50%. All right, so the procking, this really only applies the next time a weapon fires, right? So it doesn't really happen, it doesn't really affect anything in round 1. So even if you get the abilities for these officers to proc, it only affects the weapon when it's supposed to fire the next time. It sounds kind of simple, but it gets complicated because some of the G4 plus ships, their weapons don't fire every single round. They might fire every other round, or they might fire every 3 rounds, something crazy like that. So. And then the other thing to really note is that if the weapon fires before the application, so you really have to look at the details in the battle log to see this, and we'll do that in a video later on. It isn't really affected despite the text showing it procking below it. So basically you have to see the proc happen and then a weapon fires, and then basically when that proc happens, then it's going to delay the weapon that fires below it by 1 round. Whenever it was supposed to fire the next time, it's going to delay by 1 round. And then it'll still fire. It's not like it won't fire, it just kind of delays it. So it kind of throws everything off. And it has something to do with the firing patterns of your ship as well. So on a ship that actually fires a lot more, you get a better chance for the proc to happen before an opponent ship fires. And you can kind of see that in the video that we'll look at in a bit. So what I have above here is a Kelvin's normal firing pattern. You see that the weapon 3 fires every single round, and weapons 1 and 2, they fire starting in round 2, they fire every other round normally. So if you have one of these officers and they proc, then that kind of changes the entire firing pattern of the opponent's ships. And that's really what this is trying to tell you down here below. The items marked in red is when a weapon was supposed to fire for that particular round, but it kind of doesn't fire and it gets pushed back by 1 round. And here, right here, and the last component is if one of the officers proc, and if so, if they do proc, which weapon is it being applied to. So let's take a quick look here. In round 1, you see that it does proc, and it procs on weapon 3. But remember, it doesn't really affect it on the current round. It affects it the next time it's supposed to fire, right? So the officer ability then is affected in round 2. So round 2, weapons 1 and 2 fire normally, yet we do get procs. They're applied to both weapons 1 and 2. So here, whereas they're supposed to fire in round 4, they actually get pushed back by 1 and they fire in round 5. Now, weapon 3 does not fire because of the round 1 delay and the proc he has seen here. So this is why this is red. And this works really well for weapons that are firing every single round because, you know, even though you're delaying it by a round, they're supposed to fire every single round anyway. So it's in a sense, you're basically making the weapon fire less overall. Whereas for weapons that fire every other round or every 3 rounds, you're just kind of delaying the firing by a single round and they'll still fire. So, you know, it gives, then in those cases, it gives you a slight advantage. I wouldn't say it gives you an earth-shattering advantage, though. So, anyway, back to the example here. So, yes, this proc in 1 and 2, we talked about that. So, let's go to round 3. Round 3 isn't really affected at all. Why? Because, you know, weapon 2, weapon 3, it fires every single round anyway, and we got no procs here. So, this is kind of just a delayed firing from round 2 that's actually happening here in round 3. So in round 4, we had talked about weapons 1 and 2 having been delayed, so they get pushed into round 5. So here we have weapon 3 firing, so we do get a proc in round 4 on weapon 3. So because of that, then the round 5, let's move on to round 5. The weapon 3 that was supposed to fire here in round 5 gets delayed. And you see weapons 1 and 2 firing. Weapons 1 and 2 firing are because they were delayed by 1 round from their prior round, so from round 4 to round 5. And starting here, actually, so when in a normal scenario where they're supposed to fire in round 6, they won't fire in round 6. They get now reset, and they're supposed to fire in round 7 now. So let's say, you know, you have a proc here against weapon 2. So where I don't have it on the screen, but round 7, what will happen is that you'll get weapon 1 firing. You won't get weapon 2 firing. And in this case, you won't get weapon 3 firing as well because in round 6, you know, weapon 3 gets impacted here as well by the officer proc. So that was quite a mouthful. It gets really, really hard to track it through the battle logs. But let's kind of take a look at the video that I recorded back at the end of July to kind of try and confirm more or less, you know, what's happening here. All right, so this is the test that I did back at the end of July, and thank you to Data the Farmer for kind of helping out here. I ended up using my jellyfish against his tier 7 Kelvin. My jellyfish is tier 7 as well. You can see that he's got a HE Wharf with Gorkin critical hit type crew on here on his Kelvin, and then I've got, you know, Chang here. Because back then I didn't have ST Ortegas, it wasn't released yet, so I did test it with Chang, but you know, it's applicable to Ortegas as well. I've got Lorca and AJ Wharf. Lorca, of course, with Captain ability, decreases damage from the opponent by 100%, but I use him more so for the hull breach proc. He actually procs hull breach much better than Gorkin does because he can apply it at the beginning of the round, whereas Gorkin only applies upon critical hit. I got my HE Wharf here as well, and I've got my Chang. He's maxed, so he has a 50% chance of proccing the weapon delay ability when that happens, when I actually get critical hit when hull breach is applied. So I'm not even going to try and play it because it gets pretty complicated. We're just going to kind of scroll through it. I can kind of go second by second that way. So without further ado, let's kind of look at this. Alright, so this is round 1, and you see that right off the bat, because I'm doing the hitting, I do get my hull breach on. I'm hitting critically, so I do have a good chance. I get, you know, 4 different shots off, and then you see that Chang does proc in round 1, and does it proc before Data's guns hit? It does. So this should mean that in round 2 his weapon 3 doesn't fire, and he should only be firing 6 shots from weapons 1 and 2. So does that happen? Let's take a look. This is round 2. So I'm firing. I get my hits. Unfortunately, I do not get the proc from Chang right away. So this is unfortunate. You see that weapon 2 is firing 3 shots from weapon 2. I do get the proc right after that that weapon fires, and I think, honestly, I think this is kind of a like an issue. It's something that shouldn't be happening because I didn't fire at all, and based on Chang's ability reading, he should be proccing right before weapon 2 even fires. So this is, I think, is something that's a bug with this officer. Just an FYI for you. So here what it means is basically it's going to probably impact, it should impact weapon 3. So remember, we're supposed to get 6 rounds this time because of my weapon 3 proc back in round 1. So we have 3 already, and we have the 3 here coming in right now, and you see he does fire. And this proc is completely wasted for me because there's no weapon that fires before it. So what this means is that in round 4, I should only be hit with 3 shots from weapon, I guess it would be weapon 3, and not weapon 2. Weapon 2 should not fire for Data in round 4. But here you do see that there was not 8 shots, so the last 2 shots from weapon 1, well, no, I said that wrong. The last 2 shots from weapon 3 were indeed delayed, so that should continue to fire back in round 3, because even though I got this proc, because that weapon didn't fire at all, it's not going to get applied to that weapon again. So in round 3, so let's say round 3, we should actually just expect to be hit with 2 shots. Let's see if that's true. So you see my jelly is hitting. I do get the delay, so this is going to be applied, and this should be applied to this weapon. This is weapon 3. It should be applied in round 4, and you see that weapon 3 now did hit me in round 3. All right, so round 4, I should only get hit 3 times because back at the end of round 3, we did get a proc before weapon 3 fired. So weapon 3 should be delayed, and it should not fire round 4. So round 4, I should only get hit by 3 shots from weapon 1 on the Kelvin. So let's see if that's the case. So you see I'm hitting. I do get hit 3 times. This is from weapon 1 on the Kelvin. You see my procs are happening, my Oxford procs are happening, but if they're not hitting, then it should not affect anything. So yes, round 4, I only got hit 3 times. Now round 5, I should be getting hit 3 times as well. And I should be getting hit 5 times actually. So I should be getting hit 3 times from weapon 2 that was delayed, that was supposed to have fired in round 4, that was delayed by 1 round, and it's supposed to delayed to be into round 5. And then I should get the weapon 3 fires, the 2 fires from weapon 3. So let's see if that's the case. So you see Chang's proccing. So this is, yep, I get hit 3 times, and this is from weapon 2. But because Chang procced, if I had survived to round 7, which I didn't, it should have pushed out that fire from round 7 to round 8. And let's see if and weapon 3 does fire as normal. I do get a proc there, so technically it should not fire in round 6. Unfortunately, I think I blew up in round 6. Remember, we should at least see 3 hits in round 6, and that is from weapon 1. So weapon 1, remember, wasn't affected at all, so it shot in round 2, round 4, and it should hit in round 6, and it does hit me right here, and I blow up. So I know that was kind of a mouthful, and that was really complicated to kind of go through, but I really wanted to show you the proccing mechanism and how it's really impacting the fights. Unfortunately, with Ortegas, when you're using her in unison with Strike Team Lan as well as Strike Team Una, it gets, well, actually, especially Strike Team Lan, it gets even more complicated because the captain ability of Strike Team Lan, the Epic Officer, increases shots as well. So that gets really, really complicated. I'll try and do a video just separately on that, as well as kind of mixing the strike team officers and just to show you how they work, how to try and defeat them, as well as Mantis type strategies. Well, maybe the Mantis will be a separate video on itself, but I don't know if I'll ever get around to that because I kind of want to get through some of these officer videos first. So I think the plan is really going to do the officer videos on the new strike teams next, and then we'll do some an officer video really around Fat Mud and the company around that, especially when Fat Mud is captain. And again, back to the culmination of all this, why am I doing all these officer videos? I really want to kind of get to a point where we can do an updated, a new and improved based events video. All right, so let's summarize today. For today, I'd say that Chang is not very useful in ship fights. You get a little bit of a bonus, but honestly, I think you can have a much better officer in place of Chang, especially in regards to just more damage type officer or a counter officer or a mitigation officer if you're going the mitigation route. However, ST Ortegas is a whole other story. She has higher proc chances, and it's really around the strike teams and having a really good battleship crews. So I think Ortegas is definitely good, but only when used with the other strike team officers that were released this month. So strike team Laan as well as strike team Una. All right, well, thank you for tuning in today. If you have any comments, please feel free to leave them below. If you're not a subscriber yet, please hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you sometime soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.